Alright, hello Guilders 2 gamers, Mukluk here. Today is Wednesday, October 15th, and I have some unexpected Guild Wars 2 news. A new news post was posted on their website called Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity Update Elite Specializations Beta Feedback, which is a mouthful. I skimmed this and was able to immediately see that there was some new stuff in here that was not in the last article that I covered regarding the Elite Spec beta feedback. There is some stuff in here that is new, so I found it worth going over this in detail. So now we're going to dive into it and read the whole thing. Greetings, adventurers. Back in August, we ran a beta event to test and collect feedback regarding our 9 new Elite Specializations that will make their debut when Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity launches on October 28th, a little less than 2 weeks away. Today, we're going to go over the feedback we received and what changes we're making to each Elite Spec for launch. This blog will outline what we feel are the most impactful changes at a broad level. The full list of changes will be detailed in the expansion release notes. To kick things off, we received feedback during the beta that some of the Elite Spec emblems didn't represent the mechanics and themes that were presented. To better align the art and design, we'll be updating the icons for the Antiquary, Thief, and the Luminary Guardian during our first major update to the expansion early this year. So the Antiquary symbol, I believe, was a set of cards, and that combined with the fact that there was different tooltips for their abilities, like split deck and stuff like that, made it to where it's like, okay, it felt like this was supposed to have a card theme, but then it didn't have one. So just skipping ahead. Okay, so it's still cards here, so I don't know what it's going to be. And Luminary, just skimming, hold on, Luminary is still the shield. So I guess it's not reflected in the pictures that are in this article. During our first major update to the expansion. So that might mean that the first update is 3 months after the expansion launch. So that might mean that 3 months after the expansion launch is when they're changing the tooltips. Okay. Amalgam. Engineer. Feedback regarding the Amalgam landed in a solid state for the beta. I mean, yeah, it was fun to play. It had a great deal of customization with its unique version of the tool belt. And also it was overpowered. So people loved playing it because it was slapping for like, 40, 50, 60, 70k while you were, just face rolling on the keyboard with no idea what you were doing. Source experience. I had no idea what I was doing, and I was able to get just stupid numbers on it. So I am expecting the DPS of it to be toned down by maybe half. But I'm not really expecting them to change much else because it was fun to play. Let's see. Along with some balance tuning, Amalgam is receiving a new Grandmaster trait, replacing Contagious Mutation, which shared strained bonuses to allies. Contagious Mutation was a niche trait compared to its neighbors, and its existence limited the effects we could put on strains, as we had to consider them being given to allies. Contagious Mutation's removal allows us to keep strains strong and interesting while also making room for a new Grandmaster that can open up a new role for Amalgam. The new Grandmaster trait, New Genes, provides boons to allies when a morph skill is used, as well as an additional boon based on which specific morph skill was used. In PvE, the generic boon will be Alacrity, allowing the Amalgam to mold into a more supportive playstyle. With these gameplay changes, as well as some visual effect updates, it's never been a better time to slime. Okay, so let's say the Amalgam can provide Alacrity. Does that mean it can be an Alacrity DPS, and does that mean it can be an Alacrity healer? I think Alacrity DPS is going to be, yeah, I think it'll be very easy for it to do that with its kit. Alacrity healer, maybe? I mean, obviously, it could use the med kit, just like any engineer, and it could use the healing weapons because of Weapon Master training. So the question is, does the rest of the kit lend itself to being useful as an Alac healer? And I'm not sure. Most of the stuff was either a defensive tool for just yourself, not your team, or an offensive tool. So I think an Alac DPS is absolutely going to be a thing with this change. An Alacrity providing healer, I'm not sure. Like, I think it would work, but I'm not sure if it would be good. Okay. All right. Next one. Antiquary, Thief. We've taken steps to reduce the amount of guesswork required while playing as the Antiquary. For starters, we've made the split deck trait a baseline mechanic when the elite specialization is equipped. You will now always obtain one offensive and one defensive artifact whenever you pilfer, regardless of the traits that you have equipped. All artifacts now additionally give unique temporary passive effects to the Antiquary after activation, allowing for additional strategic choices even after the corresponding artifact has been used. As an example, using the Metal Legion guitar grants an effect that allows the Antiquary to use sneak attacks for a short period of time, even while not in stealth. Interesting. That sounds very powerful. I think it's going to look very silly, but that does sound powerful. Traits have also been reworked. Split Deck has been replaced with Repeat Ransacker, which reduces the recharge of Scrit Swipe whenever you use an artifact. Possessive Hoarder has had its boons altered and now grants its effects to allies around you as well. Double-edged skill icons now have a different appearance whenever they can be used while on cooldown, so to differentiate them from regular skill cooldowns. That is... Hold on, double-edged skill icons now have a different appearance. I think they're talking about like the backdraft stuff. Like when you use a skill and then you can use it again even when it is in the middle of cooling down, and there's a chance it'll blow up in your face, but there's also a chance that you can just drastically shorten the cooldown of it. And that was one of the things I gave as feedback, is that those icons should have like a different background color or something to be able to tell when they are a backdraft versus not backdraft. Okay, Conduit. The Conduit reception was not great. Let's see what they're going to change. The majority of the feedback on Conduit gameplay revolved around the Conduit's profession mechanics and bonuses being too passive. As a result, we made several changes to this elite specialization to make it more rewarding to players who want to play the Conduit more proactively. Cosmic Wisdom has been moved to the F3 slot, and their effects have been altered to provide specific bonuses specifically for the legend that each form represents. As an example, Form of Assassin now fires lesser enchanted daggers at enemies close to you whenever you use a legendary assassin skill or while channeling impossible odds. Invoking a different legend will now automatically switch your form to match the new legend, ensuring that you'll always be able to make use of the functionality of Cosmic Wisdom even when moving to a different legend. In place of Cosmic Wisdom, Release Potential has been moved to F2. These are a set of skills that are automatically equipped depending on active legends, so players will have access to 2 different release potential skills based on the legends you bring to combat. Certain aspects of these skills will scale based on the amount of affinity you have built up, encouraging the use of other legendary skills before this one to obtain max effect. Someone in chat just asked for the link. Yeah, I got you. This is it right here. Hang on a second. Okay, there we go. All right. For example, Release Potential Assassin is an attack that sends out 3 increasingly large shockwaves from yourself that damages enemies and immobilizes those that are struck by all 3 waves, with increased damage and greater immobilized duration depending on how much affinity you have accumulated. All right, so that's a lot of stuff. This is one of those situations where I can't really imagine how that's going to work out until I get my hands on it and try it for myself. But I think it's good that they're trying to make changes because, again, most of the feedback I saw for the Conduit was negative. So I think it's good that they're trying to tweak some things. Next up is Evoker, Elementalist. Big point of feedback was that the Evoker trait line tried to do too many things. The element-themed traits were flavorful and helped to further define the playstyle of each familiar, but they took up a lot of space that could be used for other things, like addressing the lack of support boons. That was the primary feedback I gave for this one. I tried to play Firefox DPS, and it was very, very straightforward face roll on the keyboard. But then when I tried Water Otter support as a healer, it had very high healing numbers, crap for boons. So I was like, okay, this is never really going to be used in any content because of this. We still like what most of these traits brought to each of the familiars, so we've decided to make them passive bonuses tied to each familiar. For example, when you're accompanied by the Otter, you will always heal allies when you grant them regeneration. As we mentioned in the previous stream for the Evoker, we suspected that the utility skill bonuses could be more than a stun break, and the majority of the feedback we saw agreed, so we went ahead with some improvements to those. We saw a ton of feedback asking for the ability to enable auto attack for the familiar skills. Our initial investigation found that this would require a complex technical change and need more time to ensure quality and stability, but rest assured that is a high priority for the team and will release it as soon as it's ready. Okay, so when that sounds like when the Evoker is released, they will not have auto attack able to be turned on for the familiar skills. For those that had no interest in trying the Evoker, the issue is like your F1 or whatever the button was. Like you'd hit 2 or 3 buttons, hit F1, 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 hit 2 or 3 buttons, and it was just constant. It was almost like when you're playing Berserker, and you're like hit a few buttons, burst, hit a few buttons, burst, hit a few buttons, burst. It was F5. Okay, F5 then. So you're going back and forth on it constantly. And that's why a lot of people are like, can you just have this thing fire automatically? So it sounds like that's not going to be there at release, I would guess, from reading this as written. Possibly in a patch very soon after. Galeshot Ranger. Galeshot aimed high and shot true over the beta week. There's always room for improvement, so here's a bird's eye view of the adjustments we've made. The largest change will be to Galeshot's arrow generation. Gaining arrows was largely a passive experience, and there weren't enough options to add arrow generation to your build. In the beta, we saw that in PvE, most of the Galeshot's strength came from triggering the Shrike Grandmaster trait rapidly. We are happy to see Galeshot reward projectile-focused builds we saw utilizing Shrike, but we want to make sure playstyles built around the other Grandmasters are also viable. Shrike's arrow generating capabilities are going to be lowered, and Squall skills will now grant arrows on use. This will help the Grandmaster traits stay in parity with each other, while also making arrow generation a more active process. Additionally, Fetch, the master trait that also aided in arrow generation, is being reworked to Thrill of the Catch, granting an arrow when you or your pet disable an enemy. Squall skills will also see usability changes such as Whirlwind breaking stuns, Perfect Storm being castable while moving, and Mistral becoming a dome. In competitive modes only, Quarry's Peril and Pelt will grant 2 Wind Force stacks to make it easier to access Hawkeye in high-pressure situations. Lastly, the Cyclone Bow will now remember when it's been set to auto-attack. Yeah, I had forgotten about that. Yeah, whenever you pulled out the airbow, it wouldn't have an auto attack, so you'd have to be mashing 1 or control right click it to turn the auto attack on, but anytime you put it away and swap back to it, the auto attack would be off again. Be sure to keep an eye out for a new pet to encounter in Kastora that works with Galeshot's Flock Together trait. I believe the Flock Together trait was a buff to all bird type pets, so the phoenixes, the moas, and the normal birds. So I'm guessing we're getting some kind of bird in Kastora. Mistral being a dome will make it a lot easier to use. Mistral, when I was playing Galeshot, was like one of the highest sources of damage, which I think is not good, and I'll explain my reasoning for that. So Mistral would summon a wall in front of you, and when you fired through the wall, it would increase the damage of projectiles. So what the build encouraged was you would use your airbow, shoot through the wall, use your longbow, shoot through the wall, and then use throwing axes and shoot through the wall, and then just keep rotating, through between those 3 projectile weapons. A lot of people, when they announced that Galeshot would have basically a longbow, the airbow, on hand at any time, they were like, oh, this is going to open up the possibility to have, melee stuff in the other kits because we'll always have this bow. And it doesn't, because most of the damage is from Mistral, so you have to, run triple projectile weapons. There is no room for melee in there. Maybe in PvP or something, but not in PvE, because so much of the damage comes from Mistral. Making it a dome instead of a wall is going to make it a lot easier to use, because if you summon the wall and then you suddenly have to reposition, you get like a red circle or something you got to move out of, it'll be easier to not lose the angle to fire through the thing if it's a dome. So that is certainly, a good change, I believe. I think it might confuse some people if, they think it's a projectile blocking dome, and then, it's not. It's just like a projectile buffing dome. So I wonder if maybe only the Galeshot should see it and not others. I don't know. It's something to think about, though. All right. Let's see. Luminary, Guardian. Trying to remember, what was the feedback for Luminary? Was fine. They did say already in the last blog that we covered that they were going to make it so that the Luminary virtues did not use the base Guardian virtues and it would get its own. Additionally, there was talk of changing the way the cooldown works with some of the weapons from the Shroud, and also they were going to rename the Shroud because it's not a Shroud. While reviewing Luminary feedback, we saw a few of the same points being repeated consistently. The lack of Luminary-specific virtues, the penalty for using too many Radiant weapons, the low impact of the weapons themselves are the main issues that we're addressing. We've introduced a set of Radiant virtues to replace the core Guardian virtues. We still want to capture some of the feeling of core virtues with shorter cooldowns and instant effects, but they will bring a bit more to the table. Each of the virtues will also bring up the next usage of their respective Radiant weapon, with Virtue of Justice empowering the hammer, Virtue of Resolve empowering the staff, and Virtue of Courage empowering the sword and shield. Our initial goal with the Shroud's recharge time, which scaled with the number of weapons used, had been to create more flexibility to dip in for a single Radiant weapon. For example, use the shield to block an attack and then immediately exit with a shorter cooldown. It became clear that scaling past a typical recharge time de-incentivized interacting with the Shroud too much, and felt like a significant penalty beyond our initial intent. We've reduced the maximum recharge time to 10 seconds, 15 in competitive modes, while continuing to grant a reduced recharge for unused weapons. This will allow players to get a small recharge reduction when using a single weapon, with the downside of an excessive recharge time when utilizing the full state. Finally, Radiant Shroud has been renamed Radiant Forge. Okay, the rename thing is good, because, again, it didn't act like a Shroud at all. They didn't have to build up an energy resource to go into it. Because, they did not have to, they did not have it protect their hit points like a second hit point bar. Like, it was simply not a Shroud. And Forge is a lot closer to what it was. It's a lot more similar to Hollow Forge than this. Aside from the naming thing, the new virtues, again, we don't have tooltips for them. Kind of need to see what they do before I have an opinion on that. And curious to see how the new weapon cooldown will feel for the Radiant Forge. When I tried the Luminary, I did it as a heal support, and it was fine. It wasn't bad. It didn't feel great either. It was just fine. Okay. Paragon. Paragon, when I tried it, it was absolutely the strongest healer. I don't know that it was the funnest, but it was absolutely the strongest. Like, it was able to go into the extreme damage field and just, like, take a bath. It was, and not even using half its skills. Like, ignoring half of its cooldowns, it was able to just, like, sit in the extreme damage field and it was fine. Whereas the Evoker, when I tried that, I died in like 3 seconds. Paragon feedback was largely focused on a few key areas. Many utility... another thing that people said about the Paragon was that there was like no damage in it. Like, you could play it as a Giga support, but playing it as like a DPS support or like just DPS was impossible at the time. Paragon feedback was largely focused on a few key areas. Many utility skills lacked impact. Some traits felt a bit plain, and adrenaline was hard to come by. We did a pass on the utility skills to add some additional value. Brace Yourselves now also grants protection to allies while granting bonus adrenaline to the Paragon on both activation and echo. We Shall Return and Find Their Weakness also grant some bonus adrenaline to their respective echoes, which we expect to play well with the reverberation trait to refuel the Paragon's chance. Feverish Pulse lacked depth for a Grandmaster trait, so we folded in the effects of Brisk Pacing to give it some additional power. This also frees up a slot in the Master tier for an additional damage-focused trait, as we saw a lot of feedback that Paragon's damage potential wasn't quite there yet. It was non-existent. Strengthening Stanzas moves out of the Grandmaster tier to fill that slot, making room for a new Grandmaster trait with a bit more active gameplay. This trait will grant bonus damage based on current motivation, the same 1 through 3, 4 through 6, or 7 through 10 thresholds used by chance, rewarding good resource management with nice damage increase. Okay. I'm surprised I don't see any mention here. The third chant, it was like Chant of Movement or something like that, I feel like it was useless. I never had a time where it was needed. So I'm kind of surprised that one's not getting redesigned in any way, shape, or form, but maybe other people didn't share that opinion of mine. Okay, cool. Ritualist. So my number one feedback with Ritualist personally was it felt like they tried to shoehorn in mesmer mechanics. You know, you would summon the spirits and then you would shatter them, basically. And that felt really stupid. I am one of the people that really enjoyed Ritualist in Guild Wars 1. I wasn't great at it or anything, but I enjoyed it. And in Guild Wars 1, you would summon your spirits, and you could keep them out forever. You know, you would summon them. There was another skill that would like snap them to you so that you could reposition them, and they would fight with you all the time. It felt kind of like a pet class, but you were using stationary pets that could be repositioned rather than ones that could run around. The Ritualist, while it was fun, the Writ in Guild Wars 2 was fun, it wasn't Writ. Because you would like summon the spirits and either shatter them or leave Shroud, which auto-shattered them. It did not feel like I had spirits at all. I was kind of like, the other mechanics were very fun. It had some really cool, unique powers and abilities on its action bar. Like the utilities and stuff were really neat, but the spirits themselves were going, you know? All right, let's see what they're going to do. Ritualist Shroud lacked impact, with a lot of its damage coming from the spirit's auto attacks. We're putting a bit more damage into the Shroud skills themselves and adjusting some cooldowns to give some more incentive to stick around in Shroud for a longer period of time. Summon spirits while bringing a good amount of utility with its teleport and ability to reposition the spirits felt too simple when compared to other iconic 5th Shroud skills. So Shroud 5 would teleport you and your spirits to a target location. It will still teleport and bring the spirits along with you, but instead of causing them to perform an auto, each spirit will now use a new unique skill. Anguish will fire off a quick flurry of projectiles. Wanderlust... Hi, Michaelis. Where were we? But Wanderlust will launch a larger projectile that dazes nearby enemies, and Preservation will create a protective barrier that destroys enemy projectiles. Interesting. So it'll do damage, CC, and projectile block. Okay. That's already pretty good, because like if a Necro wants projectile block right now, they usually bring CPC, which is Corrosive Poison Cloud, which is a utility skill, takes up a utility slot. So this means that a Ritualist will have access to a projectile block without having to have it on the bar. That is similar to Untamed, which when they unleash their pet and use the F3, they get the big Stink Cloud, which is a projectile block without taking up a space on their bar. It's just baked into the kit. Can I get the link for this? Yeah, I got you, right there. Rupture skills brought powerful effects, but tearing down spirits was slightly opposed to the core fantasy of summoning and maintaining spirits. We've rebranded them as innervation skills, e.g. Innervate Anguish to give Ritualists the feeling of channeling power through the spirits. The effects are still the same, but using skills will no longer destroy the respective spirit. Now, that's awesome, but I'm wondering, when you leave Shroud, does it still kill them? I would assume not. Because right now what it is your F1, F2, and F3 shatter the first, second, and third spirit. But if you leave the Shroud, it would auto-use F1 and F2, F3. And that would kill them all. So now if F1 and F2 and F3 don't shatter them, I assume they would stay out even when you leave Shroud, which could make it much more fun. I'm very happy to hear that. I would say the closest thing to something I was considering maining in the new expansion was Writ, and that was the biggest thing that was bugging me, and I'm happy to see that they agreed with that feedback. There's a GM trait that makes them stay out of Shroud. Yeah, but I'm not sure if they're changing that or not. So we will see. We will see. Okay. So there's two possibilities. Possibility one, they simply don't shatter when you use the F1, F2, and F3 in Shroud, but they'll still shatter when you leave Shroud. Possibility two, they will not shatter in either of those situations. I'm hoping neither. I really don't want the spirits to be tied to you having to stay in Shroud, or else they just disappear, but that's just me. Okay, so hopeful, but not certain with what they're doing with Writ. We'll see. All right, Troubadour. Troubadour is seeing changes across the board after its beta performance fell a little flat. So I played Troubadour for a session, and I did it as a support healer with Rifle, Mesmer Rifle. It was very good. I think the only thing it was second to in terms of power was support Paragon, which felt almost cheating. It did a surprising amount of barrier with the I forget the name of the move. The one where you get all the instruments out and you hit the one move and then they all do like it's like crescendo or something. That gave like a very surprising amount of barrier to the party. So the barrier numbers were shockingly high. And then on top of that, the healing and the boons were exceptional. Reverberating loot is becoming lively loot, sending damaging sound waves toward your enemy while also sending healing tones toward your allies. The harmonious harp is being updated to function as a channeled skill, having its healing condescending healing, condensed to give a more impactful feel, while also granting distortion at baseline. This allows the Troubadour's harp to be a strong healing tool, while their lute can handle smaller amounts of more frequent healing. Tails and their performance bonuses are also being adjusted. For the healing utility tails, for the healing and utility tails, the performance bonus will grant notes for playing their matching instrument, and the abilities themselves will always be full strength. This allows for more innate note generation while also making their usage more flexible. There's a decent amount of trait adjustments, both small and large. The minor traits are being fully reworked. Symphonic Resonance now grants a unique bonus based on which instruments are playing, such as movement speed with the drum or small pulse healing with the harp. Harmonize will now grant a note whenever you use a phantom skill to improve note generation even more. Interesting. I really didn't notice a pain with note generation, but the fact that they're increasing note generation in multiple ways is going to make it even easier, so I'm interested to see how that's going to feel. I also wonder, like this right here, if they were talking about like DPS Troubadours. Because again, the healing one felt fine. But, you know, I'm just one person. Maybe others didn't share that experience. Troubadour is being changed from granting allies alacrity to granting quickness, and will do so with the new master trait, Life of the Party, which grants boons to allies affected by your lively loot or crescendo skills. We hope that with these changes, the next time you see a Troubadour, it will strike the right chord. I'm curious if other people still cannot hear the Troubadour's music, because that's kind of funny, considering what they are. During the beta, they did, early on, the music was, like, unhearable. It was in the same volume setting as combat music, and not combat music, sorry, combat sounds. So you had to make combat, like, deafeningly loud to hear the songs from the Troubadour. Then they changed it, so it was all using a separate volume slider, but you didn't hear other people's. So I could hear my own loudly after that change, but I could not hear other Troubadours when I would stand right next to them. And we tested that with like 3 Troubadours in the aerodrome. So I'm wondering if they'll make it to where you could hear other Troubadours, or if they think that that would just be annoying. Guild Wars 2 Visions of Eternity launches soon. Thank you once again for playing the beta and giving us your feedback. It is truly invaluable to have a community so committed to helping us shape our game. Be sure to check out the official release notes when Guild Wars 2 VOE goes live October 28th to see all the changes we're making, and as always, we'll keep our eyes on the forums and elsewhere for feedback after the expansion launches. Until next time, we'll see you in the mists. And that's all of it. Very interesting stuff. So a lot of this is like, hey, we're doing these changes to stuff, but it's like we still need the tooltips. Like, you know, new set of virtues. Okay, what do they do? You know, like we need to specifically see these tooltips before we can decide if we like this or not. Things like that. There's a lot in here like that where kind of need to see exactly what they're doing. Like, with what I was hoping for from Ritualist, this paragraph gives me a shadow of hope, but I'm still not completely sure if that is, you know, fulfilling what I wanted, but we'll see. So a lot of this is like good news, but need to see it to fully make a decision. Think that's everything. So that is all we've got from this article right now. Eager to see more. Keep in mind that a couple of the things in here are not going to be at launch, like the ability for Evokers to turn their familiar on auto attack, and the icons for Antiquary and Luminary, stuff like that. They said would be in the first major update, which might be 3 months after the expansion launches, not on launch day. So if you're looking forward to those things, you know, just have the right expectation of when they're going to hit. I think that's everything for today. Was not expecting this. Usually they do stuff like this on Tuesdays, but here we are. So if you got any questions, problems, thoughts, concerns, or if you noticed anything that I missed, put it in the comment section down below, and I'll fight you there.